Hello, friend, and welcome to another episode of Van Life Living in New York. I'll tell you, it's a little chilly out here today, and it's almost ready to rain, but it's not. It's supposed to start at any time. It was raining earlier, so it's tempting me into taking a walk in the woods, but I know what's going to happen because I looked at the weather app, right? So I know that here, if I go start taking a hike, I'm going to end up in the pouring down rain, and I'm not dressed for being warm and dry at the same time today. I could choose one or the other probably, but not both. So I think I'll just stay here in the pavilion. Anyway, yesterday I was talking to you all about Yom Kippur and Passover and all that, and how that relates to Jesus' crucifixion. But today I'm going to just talk to you about, well, I'm not even sure yet, friend. I had some ideas, but, I never really think about it in advance because that's not the way the Holy Spirit works with me. He told me I'm not supposed to think about things. So I'll talk to him about things, and we'll discuss things, and then I come on here and I talk to you about whatever comes to my mind. Because the purpose of the world is to come to know love by experience. So no matter what you hear in my videos, always remember that I love you, period. And that I'm not judging you. But I have to say things that sound hard. And if you're guilty of some of the things I talk about, you'll get mad and want to crucify me, right? You want to nail me to my cross just like Christ got nailed to his. Well, that's the beautiful thing about being able to talk on the internet. Since I'm not talking to you, you can hit the little red X button and I'll disappear. And, because I have to talk to you because I found this kingdom, but it took me a long time to do it because I didn't believe it. When I started reading Jesus early on, before I tried to attend churches, because I went to a 12-step program that told me I had to believe in God. And I kind of grew up being told about Jesus, but none of it made any sense to me because religion has never made sense to me, friend. But Jesus made sense even though he didn't. But since he died, and it was pretty clear that he did, and he willingly did it, that had me curious, friend. That's the reason I kept chasing Jesus. Why would a man go to a death like that, right? And so what he showed me was it's like giving birth. His labor pains were great, but in it, he gave birth to a new thought of the love of God, right? He did it for my Father and for us. And because he did it for my Father and us, well, then he also gets the benefit. Even though the labor pain was great, he gets to be the experience of love, right? That all of us talk about, that millions of people across the planet, billions probably, talk about Jesus, right? So I'm not a person that tells you about it because somebody else told me about Jesus. I finally found the kingdom because I was desperate and I did the things he asked. But it took me a long time because every time I went to churches, they weren't telling me what Jesus said. They were telling me what Paul said. And they weren't even telling me everything Paul said. They took a few choice verses and turned it into hypocrisy, right? So I'm not here to tell you what Paul said, and I'm not here to tell you what Moses said. I'm here to tell you what Jesus said and how it brought me the kingdom. Because it's about love. That's what it's all about. It's always been about that. The truth is love, and the love is truth. That's it. That's my Father in a nutshell. However, because in the beginning there was only God, and he had a thought about himself, but he couldn't experience it, right? Because he was the only one. There weren't any angels, people, creation, none of that. So he said, I am. But what could he say he was? He could say he was love, but love's a word. How many times do you see people that hurt and betray people and say they love them, right? So love isn't a real word. It's an action. Love is sacrifice. Even though everybody will go, oh, well, love isn't sacrifice. Sure it is. I know my parents love because they sacrificed so much for me over the years, right? I know their love from their forgiveness and their sacrifice. That's what love is. I've had other people tell me they loved me and they treated me like trash. They didn't love me, and if that was their version of love, it wasn't mine. And friend, there was a time when my version of love, you wouldn't have wanted it either, right? I didn't know Jesus. I didn't get what he was saying. And I was selfish. And here's the truth. Any Christian that really confesses the truth, most of us start off seeking God because some of us might feel guilty, right? But the problem with that is because they tell you don't have to believe in Jesus, that you just have to believe in Paul, and that you get that faith without works is fine. But the truth is, faith is an action word, just like believe. If you go to the Hebrews when they were using that word, it turns out it's an action word for them, right? It's a verb, not a noun, or whatever adjective, I don't know, whatever you call it. I'm not that smart, friend. So anyway, that's what I found, and that's the reason I kept losing the kingdom that I would start to gain, and I wanted it, but I didn't know how to get it, and I wasn't really, and here's the truth. When I first started looking at what Jesus was saying, I could see what he had, and I could see what he was telling me to do to get it, but I really didn't want what he had. I'm not going to lie to you. He wanted to bring me a kingdom where I sacrificed much for others. And I was a man that hadn't even had anything for himself yet, right? And I was still selfish, and I wanted to know myself by my greatness. Well, it turns out, the greater I thought I was, the less I became, right? Because then I became more selfish and caused more suffering. So, and it doesn't matter, I was never a millionaire or nothing or other. It's just a matter of, you know, when you're selfish, you hurt people. So selfishness causes suffering, and sometimes you don't even know that. So I'm not expecting you to necessarily believe that, because here's the dilemma. Some of you all are going to hear this, and you're going to love it, and you're going to do it, and it's going to make a change in your life like you just never believed. Others of you are going to hear me say it, and you're going to get angry at me for what I've said and what I will say about Christ, because if what I'm saying is true, then what you believe isn't true, and therefore you will hate me for telling you the truth that I have. Because if you go read Christ, you'll see that my truth is his and his is mine, right? So, because, you know, the fact, the moment I put Paul second place in this relationship, because Paul is a wonderful guy, right? He started the church. That's what he was here to do. But my father knew the end and the beginning, so understand that Paul wasn't supposed to bring them the kingdom. He was supposed to start the process. We're here at the end of the age, friend. By now, you have all kind of light around to choose. And there's going to be some sacrifice involved if your life is like mine. If you're a person that's drinking and doing drugs and all that stuff and hanging around with selfish people, if you start being something different, you aren't going to save them. If you try to get them to quit drinking and do all that, or if you declare yourself having a drinking problem or any of that, they're going to sabotage your kingdom. They're not going to mean to. People don't mean to do it. They just don't want what you want yet, and they're not suffering bad enough to get it. Most of us start seeking the kingdom because we come to a place in our lives where we just hate it. Some of you might not. Some of you might have went in search of meaning. I went in search of meaning because I was tired of pain, friend. I ain't lying to you. So, but on the other hand, I also did want the meaning of life. I did want to know God. God kind of put me in a corner years ago by revealing himself to me in a way that I couldn't deny, even though everybody else would deny it. And then he did that a few times over the years. There's been times where God did things that I knew there was no other way. Like, he would give me gifts. Now, friends, I'm not talking about, I always wanted like new cars, big houses, all that stuff, right? That isn't the things he got me. He gave me a bicycle. He gave me a tall ship. He gave me a banjo. You know, I never learned to play that banjo. The gift was not that. I believed in God that he would show, that he would just do things for me, and I never knew what he was going to do or when. But like, I'm going to just give you a couple of these, right? Okay. One time I was driving my car and the road was washed out around the corner and I didn't know it. This was in my earlier 20s. And because of that, it had quit raining, but I didn't know that the road was washed out, and I wasn't thinking about it because I was in a hurry, and it wasn't a road I traveled regular. And a voice showed up in my head, and it said, slow down. And I was in a hurry, so I didn't really listen to it. And it yelled at me. It yelled, slow down! And I mean like loud enough to kind of shake me up. And I slowed down, and I turned this turn, and the road was washed out, and I would have hit the tree on the other side. So I would have either been pretty well beat up or else killed in that accident that I was going to cause by my foolishness of speeding because I was in a hurry, right? So after that point, I knew God would talk to me. And he talked to me once before that when a friend of mine died and came to me and said that right when I was waking up one day that she was with him. But that one I couldn't prove, and when I told people, they didn't believe it. And, at that point, I wasn't ready to accept that was God. So, and when I'm saying that God spoke to me and I knew it was God, I did not start behaving. I went back to drinking, drugs, sex, all of it, friend. I'm just not this guy. I was never afraid of God. That never made sense to me. So I didn't abide in the rules for the fear of God, right? So I'm not the person to follow that way, because what did happen is I caused more suffering, which caused myself more suffering. And there's periods in my life where I thought about suicide fairly regularly. But anyway, so he's put me through a lot in my life, but then he's also given me these gifts. And toward the end, he gave me, like one time, I was thinking about getting a bike. I saw one at Walmart, but it had that cheap powder coat paint. You know how Walmart is. It sells everything cheap, but everything's cheap. I mean, it's not going to hold up. So they had this great looking bike, but I could tell just by the paint was going to fall off of it in 30 seconds. But it was like $300, and I didn't have the money, but I wanted to get it because I was going to ride back and forth to work and try to get a little exercise, because I live next to a fairly good-sized park and all, and I kind of just had in my mind I wanted a bike, even though I didn't use it near as much as I thought I would when I got it. But I wasn't going to get it at Walmart, and I was thinking about it, and then all of a sudden I quit thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, maybe not. Well, all of a sudden one day I was at home, and I was working in my flower bed out by my front porch, and this voice showed up in my head. It's not like, when I talk about the Holy Spirit being a voice, it's not like someone else's voice. It's a voice in my head that talks to me, and I know it's not mine. And it said, go to Walmart and buy that bike. I said, but Lord, no, that wouldn't make sense, because I don't even want that bike. The paint jobs. He said, go to Walmart and get that bike. And I was like, no, I don't even know for sure this is God. Maybe this is just a thought in my head. And it just kept going. Go to Walmart and get the bike. It taunted me for a half an hour, friend. On and on. It just kept saying that, right? It kept coming back to me. And I'm like, finally, this is what happened. I really went, fine, I'll go to Walmart and buy the bike. I go to Walmart. I'm sitting there. This guy that doesn't even speak English is trying to wait on me, but he can't even communicate with me. So he goes to get somebody else, and he never shows back up. And I'm getting ready to leave because I'm highly frustrated. I have this bike pulled out, off of their rack, kind of slid back on the rack. And this man and his wife come by and say, oh, you're going to buy that bike? Don't buy that bike. I got a much better bike at home hanging in the garage that I want to get rid of. I'm like, well, how much do you want for it? He's like, $50. So instead of getting a regular, this was like a kind of like, the lay-back handlebars, because I have a back issue. That was after back surgery, but I still was having a lot of problems. So I can't do 10 speeds. Otherwise, I'd love to have had a 10 speed again. But so I got one of these beach cruisers, and he's like, oh, don't buy that one. I'll sell you one. So he sold me a 7-speed Schwinn for $50 versus this cheapo junk at Walmart. But you got to understand that for that to happen, God had to know that I was going to stall for a half an hour. Then when I went to the guy's house to pick it up, for another $25, he sold me a bag that folded out into saddlebags for the bike, with also a front bar rack, and a rain suit for wearing while riding, and a car rack to mount on my car. All of it for $25. So for $75, I went home with like $500 worth of stuff, friend. That I could afford. I was working in mental health and I wasn't getting paid very well at the time. So I was just excited. So God took care of me, and He always has that way. And it's not like it's the big things. One time, all of a sudden, I felt like I was supposed to go looking for a tall ship. I'd been thinking about, well, maybe I ought to get a tall ship. All of a sudden, I knew I was supposed to go yard sailing that morning. So I went yard sailing looking for a tall ship. Just to sit on something, just because I've been a boater in my younger years. I like boats. I'm not, it's not that, anyway. So I wanted this tall ship because I've always, not only did I like boats, I also like the looks of tall ships. So I followed my instincts and I went out yard sailing. And when I went out yard sailing, I just started going places. Well, I went to this one place's firehouse, and long story short, I traveled around a few different towns, found nothing. I was on my way home. I was right back at my first stop, and I was making a right to go home. And a voice came to me as I was coming up on the red light, and it said, go straight. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. I need to go right. I'm going home. He's like, go straight. I'm like, what, did something show up at that yard sale that wasn't there before? He's like, no, go straight. And I just kept getting this voice. So I followed it, because I've learned to follow this voice. So I went straight. And when I was coming up on that firehouse, just up on the right, it said, keep going. So I kept following it. And because I followed it, when I got way out this road, where it would have come to an end shortly, there was this like township building on the left-hand side having some sort of flea market. Well, wouldn't you know, that's where he told me to go. I pulled in there, and as I was going through the stands, the last stand on the right had a tall ship for $10. A nice little tall ship, a nice one. And so I bought it. And God does that for me. And it's not like, and I can't control when He did those things for me. It isn't like I was like, God, give me this, and then He gave it to me. But He gave it to me as a gift so that I would know that He was there and that He was looking after me. And by that time, I was trying to be much more better of a person when I started receiving these last gifts. I mean, before, I used to chase Him, but I would get mad. And I'm going to tell you something, friend. I'm a person that used to yell at God. So I'm not this person. Because I was not afraid of God, I used to try to chase God, try to get Him to give me things right, and I was all selfish. Over the years, I've literally yelled at God. I've stood out in places where there weren't people around and yelled at God. And I'd feel guilty afterwards, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm glad I didn't get struck by lightning. But you know what? Somebody actually, a couple weeks ago, I saw this somewhere. That Job, he got mad at God, and he complained to God, but he didn't complain about God to other people. He complained directly to God, and that's the way I was. And I didn't really think about that at the time, because I knew He existed, but I couldn't figure out why He was hiding. And all this insanity just was driving me nuts, friend. I'm watching people murder each other and all this stuff, and I was justifying what I was doing, because I was like, oh, I'm not that bad, because these people are killing each other, so what I'm doing isn't that bad, and everybody else is doing it too, so it doesn't really matter. But it really does matter, friend. It matters as a whole, and it matters to me, and it matters to God. So if you want to be in relationship with my Father through the Son, you're going to have to clean up your act a little bit. I'm not lying to you. But it'll start off as a mustard seed, and it'll grow into a mustard tree. And I'm not doing anything wonderful anymore, friend. I used to do a whole lot more at a particular place in my life. It's a long story. But, so He's given me these gifts to let me know. But then on the other hand, I'm not this guy that was worshiping Him and doing the right things all the time. He knew what I needed to get me where I needed to go. And that's just the way it is. Some of us are going to have to experience that, because I had to go through the hard times to get to the good times. I had to go through things. And sometimes he sent me through things that literally he had me expand my business. And it was once again, and I'm not going to go into great detail because it involves other people. But I told God that I needed an answer on whether to expand my business. And he gave me a thought. The answer came to my mind. And I'm like, but Lord, I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't know how, because I don't have the credit to get. I had to expand my business. I had to spend a lot of money. I had to take a huge risk and risk failure of everything. And I was married with 4 children. I ain't joking, and they weren't mine. They were my stepchildren. But I took a risk that didn't pay off, and I did it because God told me to. And I told God I wouldn't do what He asked me to do unless He made it so clear that I couldn't deny it, and He did that. It's a long story, but anyway. And then I went and through that, I filed bankruptcy, and I hurt a lot of people, especially one man, the one that he told me to go ask money from, that should have never given me money because he was nobody to me, but God told me to go do it because that's what I was telling God. He had to make me know that was what I was supposed to do, and the guy said he wouldn't do it, and then he did it anyway. It was crazy. I'm telling you, it was a miracle. But miracle turned to hell because a few months later, September 11th bombings happened, and the market for my business dried up, and I went down and started going down in flames. And it not only took my money, it took my faith. I'm like, God, what are you doing to me? And I went into a phase where I was like, I'm not talking to God. I've got to be crazy. There's no way God would have put me into this hole. He did. Turns out He was giving me fish. I'll tell you why. Because through it I had to learn forgiveness. I had to learn humility. I was not a person that had much humility, and I was selfish. And so sometimes humiliation can lead to humility. However, humiliation isn't good. And it wasn't that the humiliation was good. It was the fact that coming out the other side, I come to understand that I was no better than anybody else. We're all equals. Even though I knew that ahead of time, there's a difference between knowing something in your head and feeling it in your heart, friend. Right? So you can know something's right and still not feel it's right. Or you can kind of know that you ought to do it and then not do it because you're just being selfish. Right? I mean, we're human. Well, my father taught me things. And then in the end, I'll tell you the truth, the reason I have the Holy Spirit the way I do, and I give Him so much, and why I'm willing to die in order to live, is because I did promise Him a death. He did finally one day. My last time of really truly screaming at God, I got really angry. And I said, I don't care if you whip, beat, and crucify me, you give me the truth or you kill me now. Because I was a marketing manager during that 2008 bank crash. And I lost my job. I just got back on my feet after suffering the humiliation for years of the bankruptcy. You don't understand what happens when you bankrupt, friend. It can tear you up. I mean, that business was everything to me. It was like my baby. I had it for 14 years. I had coddled that thing and went through a lot of hard times to build that business. And when I lost it, it was devastating. And my word wasn't any good to anybody else. So the one thing I had was my word, and then I didn't have that anymore. So I went back to, you might say, doing things that weren't right. I was mad at God and all this stuff. But anyway, so when I said that, I finally said to God, I don't care if you whip, beat, crucify me. You give me the truth or you kill me now. A death showed up in my mind. I won't tell you about it because my father doesn't say that I have to have it, but I have to be willing. I was pretty sure I was going to have it before, but he actually led me to a situation where I thought he was getting it, and I stayed. And I was kind of like, I had to put myself on the altar like Abraham had to put his son on the altar. Because I cared more, because I was so selfish, I wasn't like Abraham. I didn't have a son that I loved more than myself. I had to put myself on the altar to put the thing I love the most ahead of God, as sad as that is. But it's true. And except for I did love my parents. My mother, for sure. I loved my mother more than anything in the world. I would have said, in fact, the only reason I survived my bankruptcy was I thought about killing myself daily. And the only reason I survived was because I knew it would put my mother in a psychiatric hospital. So that's how I survived bankruptcy. I would have never survived it otherwise. Because I had no love for me either. You know what I mean? But I did love her. So even though the other day I said you can't love people if you don't love yourself, I kind of loved myself, but I really loved her because she really loved me and I knew it. And there's a bond between parents sometimes and children. And that's the way my parents were. Not perfect by any means, but they loved me more than they loved themselves and my siblings. I mean, they've sacrificed a lot for us kids over the years. So that's how I do. That's how come I wasn't afraid of God. I was like, there's no way my Father's going to send people to eternal hell if my parents wouldn't do it. They're not a greater love than God. That doesn't even make sense to me, right? So I knew there was more there. I just couldn't figure it out, and Christ wasn't ready to reveal it to me because, as you can see, I already had no fear of him, and you see what was happening. I was doing all the wrong things. So anyways, that started me down a path, and he showed me things. He showed me things that are very hard that you don't want to know about. And I've already told you about them in different videos. I'm not going to go into that today because, sometimes I get to talk about the joy and, some of the hard things, but not have to tell you about some of the things because there's things coming, friend. I try to give you a little here and a little there, but not talk about all of it all at once because this is not about fear, it's about love. But if you don't choose love, then selfishness overcomes. I don't care whether you call that thought in your head Satan. I don't care if you call it ego. I don't care if you call it the id. I don't care what you call it, it's evil. It'll cause you to betray yourself by betraying your neighbor. Because when you let your neighbor suffer, when your neighbor starts suffering, hurt people hurt people. So it's coming back at you, right? And so when a whole nation starts being selfish like we are, it's coming back at us. So those of us that left the others hungry and naked, we're paying our debt. We should have never did it. And any Christian knows that knows Jesus. But a lot of Christians don't know Jesus, so they don't know that. So anyway, and I forgive you for you know not what you do, just like Christ. So I'm not angry at anybody for doing it, but on the other hand, I have to tell you the truth. I have to call Pharisees Pharisees. That's the facts, and it's not because I'm mad at the Christian Pharisees. What I have to do is I have to speak against them so that the people listening to them will get shocked awake and go, wait a minute, and then go read Jesus, because I keep telling you, Jesus said, Jesus said, Jesus said, Jesus said. There's a reason for that. I want you to go realize that these Pharisees have been lying to you. And if you're an atheist or somebody that didn't really believe, I'm telling you that there's a truth there that you don't even have to start believing it the way they say. You'll find if you start doing what Jesus asked, that he was the Son of God, because he will bring you the kingdom. However, the problem is to really receive it, and this is where I lacked. Because I really wasn't sure that he was the Son of God, I really didn't believe in the forgiveness that he was offering. But my Father showed me it was true, and now I do have forgiveness. So everything I ever did, my Father's wiped my slate clean. It doesn't matter whether anybody else does. This is between me and my Father, right? This relationship with God is with God. The Son came so that I may get to know my Father, and I have. And so I love the Son, but I love the Father more because the Father is more than the Son. And the Son told you that. So I'm not some Christian telling you that Jesus is greater. He came to represent the love of the Father because everything is in the Father. So even the thought of Satan has to exist within the Father. So in creation, my Father is vine, two, vine, fruit. He is the fruit of two vines. However, it told you right in the Bible that he cast Satan into creation. So this thought, he doesn't control it. You do. It's in your head. It tells you to betray other people. It tells you to hate yourself. It tells you not to forgive. And then because you don't forgive others, you can't forgive yourself. And because you can't forgive yourself, you refuse to forgive others. That was what was going on with me, friend. Forgiveness is something that comes both at the same time. I have to forgive you to forgive me, and I have to forgive me to forgive you. And if I'm not willing to do both, I'm going to end up doing neither. Because when I get angry at me, I don't want to look at the plank in my eye, I'm going to look at the speck in yours. But if I look at the plank in my eye and I don't feel like I've got any forgiveness, well, then I feel guilty and miserable, and then I'm going to look at the plank in your eye so I can feel better because I feel so much pain and guilt from looking at the plank in my own eye. But with Christ is the solution to that. Christ is the firstborn Son of God, and he really did die so that you may know my Father and receive forgiveness, because my Father loves you, period. In absolute truth, my Father is love. He created all this for love, but you can't. Love's an experience. Like I said earlier, it's not a word, it's an experience. People betray you and say they love you. You know they don't love you. That's their version of love. That isn't what you were looking for. You're looking for the greatest love ever, and my Father's got it, friend. However, it doesn't mean my life goes perfect. I've got physical problems. He's asked an awful lot of me. I had to give up everything, friend. I've got all kind of problems that I don't even go into on here on this thing. But this is the thing. Because my Father has given me so much for forgiveness, and he gave me ways to absolutely know that he exists, including with, and I'm going to explain this, I've been saying that I saw God in the beginning, but that's not a good way to describe it because God has no form, so therefore you cannot see God. But if I say it this way, you're going to take it the wrong way, but it's the only way to really say it, to understand it. I was with God in the beginning. Not in the beginning then, but in the beginning a few years ago. And I know you're going to say, that you can't do that. That's crazy. Understand my Father exists outside of time. He's at the end in the beginning and right now here at the same time. And I can't explain to you how he does it. He's way beyond my comprehension of how he does it. But I understand it even though I don't, because I was with him in the beginning. Because he took me to the beginning before creation. And there was no me or him. There was the consciousness of me. And what there was, friend, it was the most terrifying experience I ever had. And if he wouldn't have restored me to sanity, I'd have never regained it. But because of that experience, because he let me see the truth of who he was in the beginning, to what it's to be like, what it would be like to be the only person in the beginning, the only thought, the only consciousness to exist. I understand why he does what he does. And I will, if I have to go to my cross 1,000 times, I'm going to do it. Not because he's just worth it. It's his reason for creating is worthy. Imagine if you were the only one. Imagine if somebody buried you in a coffin alive forever. Would you want that of God? Would you want that for yourself? Would you want that for even your worst enemy? Nobody'd want that for anybody. Nobody. My Father's not a serial killer. He loves you. He created all this for a purpose. In order for you to know love, you have to be able to give love. And the only way you can give love is through experience. And therefore, for someone to give something, someone needs it. However, he didn't force you into it. Adam and Eve, he put the fruit in the garden. They made the choice. They had a serpent in their head, a forked tongue. The serpent, if you'll notice, every snake has a forked tongue, friend. So, the thought in your head, your betraying thought, I don't care whether you call it ego, devil, Satan, I don't care what you call it. It is your betrayer. And it betrays you by telling you that you need to be more and your neighbor needs to be less. And you cause suffering with it. But he told you not to do it. And that if you did it, there would be a price at the end of the age. So I'm not lying. There is a price coming. Everybody's going to pay their due, except for those that repent and make a new choice. And it's not that I'm perfect, but I'm very intentional about whether I'm hurting other people or not, because if I hurt my neighbor, I hurt my Father. And because I hurt my Father and my neighbor, I'm going to cast myself into hell. That's the truth. My Father won't have to do it. I will hide my thoughts from God, and in that moment, I will end up in that place that I choose. So if you can't put your thoughts before God and all that you've done, you're going to cast yourself into hell. He's going to show you the word, and you're going to understand it for the first time. You're going to see the pain and suffering that you caused everyone that you wouldn't look at, and you're going to cast yourself into suffering. You're going to know that you were unworthy. However, here's the truth. You're worthy because my Father created you. But you have to choose Christ and become a worthy child. You have to decide that you want the kingdom for everybody if you want it for yourself. If you don't want it for everyone else, then you don't want it for yourself, because you're going to cause them suffering and they're going to cause you suffering. And if you make that choice in the new kingdom he gives you, it's just going to start all over again, and you're going to always have free will. You could always have to have some sort of free will, otherwise you don't know love by experience, and neither does God. So we're all going to, but those that become in the spirit of love, meaning they choose love over selfishness, and they want to love their neighbor as themselves and love God with all their heart, mind, strength, and soul. Well, you're ready for that kingdom. There's far more going on here than I can tell you. He showed me more, but I can't explain it to you. And I can say it'll be this or that, but he doesn't show me some things exactly. But I can tell you this. My Father's not a serial killer. He's been loved since the beginning. He'll be loved in the end. And Christ judges us so that he doesn't have to. That's a fact. I'm not a liar here, friend. But everybody pays their due. Everybody's had an opportunity to choose Christ. And some of you multiple times. If you go look in the church to Philadelphia, it will tell you that he that overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will go out no more, meaning not again, meaning you've been leaving the kingdom. So, but at the end, everybody's paying debt. But you can see that people have been paying debt. Do you think it was fair that some of you were born into this wonderful Christian family where you got all this love and care and joy, and then some other kid was born into hell, into a drug dealer's den, and gets abused and neglected? My Father's just as fair. I don't understand how it works. He doesn't show me. He just shows me that what you give is what you're going to get. There is no getting a free ticket in the kingdom if you're going to hurt your neighbor. It's just not the way it works. My Father's just as fair. If it wasn't, you'd be mad. But if you scream for justice, justice has to be served, and because you scream it on others, he's going to deal it on you. Or you can scream for mercy. Mercy, Father. And then because you scream for mercy and you give mercy for it, then he'll give you mercy. So forgive, and you will be forgiven. Love, and you will be loved. Seek to bring peace, and you will receive peace. Bring joy and receive joy. It's in the giving that one finds. I can't even, just like the prayer of St. Francis. That prayer is true, friend. I'm telling you it is. And it doesn't mean you're not going to go through things. Like I said, I'm telling you, Paul even said it. He said he went through all that for Christ and how honored he was. And friend, I don't want to go through the things Paul went through, but I'm willing. Because I talk on here all the time, people judge me. There's a good chance that sooner or later someone might kill me thinking they're doing God a favor because they don't want to believe my truth is true, because that means they're not going to heaven, and somebody's been lying to them for 30 years saying they were, and because I'm telling you the truth of what Christ said, people are going to get scared and want to kill me. And then I talk against the corporations. And if God decides to make me popular on YouTube, they'll kill me too. I'm not lying to you. You think I don't know that? Y'all don't realize it, but you know what happens? I gave my Father that death. Satan's got no power over me, friend. If my Father has to have it, he'll get it. He just has to give me the courage, right? But I can't die for you. I would be a counterfeit Christ, wouldn't I? Because Christ died for everyone. So it just is what it is. But it doesn't matter. I'm watching where this world is going and where this nation specifically is going. And you, friend, are part of my tribe. I'm an American. You're part of my tribe. I love you. If I have to die so that you can live, I will. I won't kill you. I won't kill for you, but I'll die for you. I'll die for your children if you won't die for your own children. I'm not lying to you here, friend. I don't know how to do it. I'm scared. I'm a coward. But my Father has taught me that he'll lead me. All I have to do is follow him. And if I do it all wrong, it'll still be all right. And you don't have to believe in me because you already have Christ. Go believe in him. Right? That's just the way this works. You don't have to believe in me. But I've been breaking down parables for 4 years. Well, you only find the last year and a half. It's a long story. I ain't going into it at the moment. But I've been talking this message for a while, friend. I've been sowing my seed. As I was reaping, I was sowing, friend, just as my Father told me to. So I've been telling you all the truth. The people are out there right now, and I can't see them. Some people have replied back that had been listening to me for a while, and then said they just went and looked at all the things I said and said that they found Jesus said it, and that they thanked me and they invited me that if I ever come to where they live, the state they were in, that I was welcome to come visit them. So there are people that are listening. So there's people out there right now cleaning their garments and preparing their horses. I'm telling you, friend, the remnant army of Christ is going to ride soon. There's just no way it's not gonna. We have allowed this nation to fall into darkness. The crop is going to go bad standing in the field. So my father's going to have to harvest his crop. And you don't know how much love those Christians have until they're no longer at their post, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and visiting the sick in prison. And when all that love disappears, friend, I'm telling you, all those people that were being coddled aren't going to be coddled no more because somebody ain't feeding them. They're coming for yours, I'm telling you. I hate to be telling you truth that's scary, but these are the truths. But I don't know when my father's taking his crop, and I don't know how he's doing it. Christians have this all way half off, even though some of it might be right. You know, Mystery Babylon has not been judged. So if he said, flee from her, my people, that means Babylon receives its judgment before his people are taken, or else not all of his people are taken. Friend, there's a whole lot going on there. Jesus said that 10 brides would awaken, and 5 would have oil, and 5 would not. And that the 5 that didn't have oil, which means they've been doing nothing. They thought they were going to get in with no works, but because they have no works, they have no love, and they have no faith. So fear is going to overcome them in a hurry. So they're going to run to the soup kitchens, to the homeless shelters, trying to get a position, trying to love people so they can get into the kingdom. And the people that are there are going to be like, sorry, friend, go to the store and get your own. And they're going to have to go get creative on how to help people and keep till you figure it out. Because my father is only accepting spirits of love. He's not accepting your spirits of selfishness. If you're a selfish person, all you care about you, and you haven't done the things Christ asked, you don't know him. At the end of the age, he's going to say, I don't know you. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was naked, you didn't clothe me. I was sick in a prison, and you didn't visit me. Now, I didn't do it for years. Well, I did for a while. I fed the hungry, clothed the naked. I visited the sick in a prison. I love doing it. You know what happened, friend? Here's the reason, and you would have never convinced me this early on. My father had to literally crush me before I would get around to doing what he asked. But when I started loving all these people that I was judging before, or people that I didn't know and I was scared to go meet because I was afraid of them and all this stuff, when I started loving them, they started loving me. And then when they started loving me, I started loving them even more. And before you know it, these people that you would put down, I love, man. They're my people. The people that are sick and in prison, the people that are out there hungry and naked, friend, those are my peeps. I love them folks. But my father took me away from doing what I was doing with them because I have to deliver this message. But this is the fact. If there's only been one person out of the last 4 years that heard my message and went and took my place, well then, even though I'm talking the message of Christ, if one person went and entered the field on my behalf, well now, my father's lost none of his crop. But if 2 go because of the message I've been giving, well now I've doubled my share of the crop, right? So if over the 4 years, if 5 people go out there and do that, I have multiplied my seed 5 times. So even though I'm not out giving the love the way I used to, I'm multiplying it by trying to get you to go do it because it's joyful. I'm telling you it is. But some people do it for credit. There are people out there that are doing, and they say they know Jesus, but you know the difference. You can know someone by their fruit. There are people that are just simply doing it for the credit, but there are other people that are doing it for the love, and you will know them by their fruit. I'm not lying to you. But that's only if you know the fruit of the Spirit, right? If if you get to know Jesus really well, you'll start saying, because there was people that they needed the credit because they felt terrible. They had not accepted Christ. They did not know Christ. Even though they were Christian, they did not know Christ. They needed the credit. I don't blame them. I was in the same boat at a point in my life. I used to give my gifts in secret and then give them away. Right? Because Satan would come to me when I was having a spiritual deficit and I was like feeling bad about myself. He'd be like, tell them what you did, that secret that you did. And I'd be like, oh, I did blah, 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 blah. And they'd be like, oh, you're such a wonderful person, Jason. I'd be like, oh, thank you. Right? Because I needed it, because Satan was beating me up. My thought of ego, I don't care what name you put on it. Well, then, you know what happened? The next time I needed to be like, when that thought of Satan was coming to me, instead of being able to see, I knew I'm doing it for the right reason because I had it put in the kingdom. Then that thought, the same one that talked me into getting rid of it, would be like, Jason, you only did that for the credit. See, you gave it away. You're still a piece of crap. I'm not lying to you, friend. That's my betrayer in my head. Jesus came and I fell on the rock and I was broken into two. There's a spirit of love and the spirit of selfishness in me, and I know the difference. Now, sometimes I have to really look at why I'm doing what I'm doing and seek God to know which is the right thing, because God said, getting a rich man in the kingdom is like getting camel through an eye of a needle, but an eye of a needle was a low gate in the wall. So therefore, the only way a camel was getting through was on its knees. It means in humility. It means putting God ahead of you. It means loving God with everything. And then loving your neighbor as yourself. So for a camel to go through the eye of a needle is to hang all the laws and the prophets on only 2 commandments, because one is like the other. Then you will become a camel that goes through the eye of a needle. These truths, friend, you just can't help them. You'll love them when you find them, but if you're doing it all for the selfishness of it, you might hate me, and it is what it is. Well, friend, I'm going to get off here because I've been way too long as always. But I just love talking about Christ. I love talking about what he showed me, these parables. I love breaking them down for you. Some people really hate me for it. Some people love me for it. Understand, I don't want the credit. It's all my Father's. He gives me all this stuff. I'm not a smart man, never was. He just gives me things. Just like I downloaded the other day where I kind of really laid it out, the crucifixion for Hebrews, the unveiling, that video, if you go check that one out. He gave me all that. That's not stuff that I found. My Father just gives me things and tells me I'm going to tell you all about it, so I do it. Anyway, just know that I love you because my Father loves you. And if I'm going to love all of him, I got to love all of you because you're in him and he's in you, even if you don't know it yet. You might be an atheist, but I'm telling you that there is nothing outside of God. If my Father ever left, all of creation would go with him. Christians won't buy into that. I don't care. You can tell me I'm a liar. It doesn't matter to me. Do you think God's going to be upset that I just thought he was so great that there was nothing greater than him? I'm telling you. Worst case scenario, when I show up in front of judgment, God will be like, Jason, I can't believe you gave me too much credit. Right? No, of course he's not. He's going to be like, I love you too, son. So that's the way to be. So give God all the credit. And then you don't have to worry about taking it for yourselves. And whenever people give me credit, I go back before my Father and I'm like, Father, tell me the truth. And he's like, you're nothing, Jason. I'm not. I'm a thought he had about himself. Just like you. But I'm ready to admit it. And that means since you're a thought of him, just like I'm a thought of him, I got to love you to love me and him. And I got to love me to love you and him. And I got to love him to love you and me. Right? All right, friend. Just know I love you because my Father loves you. And may God bless you and yours.